When I first began to work in the humanitarian sector, I kind of approached the world with a saver attitude. You know, like, we are the experts, we know the most, we bring resources to wherever it's needed. I came to realize later on that we actually forget sometimes that there is so much to learn from the people we meet along the way. Their perspective, their experience, their knowledge are so valuable actually to address their needs. They hold this key knowledge for that addressing. In my first assignment, basically, I ended up working in a marvelous place. A place in West Papua at the far end of the Indonesian's archipelago. That place was really great. Papua was just a contrast of everything I knew. The people, the culture, the landscape, everything was different. My first challenge wasn't medical. It was rather cultural. I would call it personal. Because when I arrived at the airport, I realized that my first name, Hani, considered to be a girl's name over there. So it was quite fun when someone is calling your name, expecting Miss Hani to arrive, and I showed up. That was quite fun, but we passed over that part very quickly, as there were so many challenges ahead waiting to do. But getting around in Papua was actually a hustle by itself. You need to carefully plan your logistics. You need to take like small airplanes, helicopters, landing airstrips, small airstrips, and quite a hustle of hiking and carrying your stuff and your equipments and medication, everything with you. And when you are arrived in the spot, there is so much to do. Especially when I realized that I'm going to be the only doctor in a remote village in the mountains where they hadn't seen a doctor for the past few years. So reaching there, in that place, knowing that there's so much to do, you start to prioritize your aid. I remember my first patient, adult patient, who arrived to the clinic with a swollen knee joint. It was quite hurting, making a lot of pain. This guy could barely walk. And I started to examine him the way I used to know. I used to do examine patients like in medical school, and I could sense something was really off in the communication. Something wasn't really right. My translator looks at me and says, "Doctor, the patient would like you to listen to his knee joint." I go, "What?" "Yeah, you need to take your stethoscope and actually place it on the knee joint. This is what our doctors expect to do here." Oh my God. And I was like, okay, I'm not just about now losing my name, but I'm actually have to give away part of my profession. At that moment, I had a choice to make. Should I stick to my principles and my medical training, or should I try to adapt to that cultural expectations? What happened? What are the consequences of both choices? Remember, this guy has kind of survived without seeing a doctor for a few years. So me being there is not really a big deal for him. What happened if I don't honor his request? Would he trust my advice? At that stage, I decided to go along with it. I placed my stethoscope on the knee. I've never done that before. I didn't know what to expect. But to my relief, the knee was perfectly quiet and silent. And after listening to few knees and elbows and heart and lungs in between, I could finally destroy that myth. I could finally gather everyone in a proper health education session and demonstrate that there is no point of such examination. But you know, this little harmless act opened the doors for me widely for a community acceptance. After all, I learned a valuable lesson on how to establish a doctor-patient relationship based on trust, based on mutual trust, beyond the color of skin, religion, life direction, or whatever. But you have to respect and trust, and you have to trust your patient, and they should trust you. So Papua was actually a very interesting school. I learned to communicate without using words. I learned to calculate without using conventional numbers. And I certainly learned to listen without having to expect any sounds. However, Papua was not really a typical MSF mission. In a second, you will see some of those missions, some of those pictures, places where we are used to work. Disaster situations, epidemics, displacements, and you know, the principles are the same. We need to work close to our patients. We need to understand their needs and to engage with the communities. It doesn't matter actually if you are in the middle of the Congo rainforest trying to find innovative solutions to get there, or if you're trying to evacuate a patient from Ukraine using a medical train, an intensive care unit train. The principles are the same. We need to get to our patients, and for that, you need to be innovative. What I love with MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctor Without Borders, that we always like to think outside the box. And when the people move, we move too. I'm talking about resources and resource limiting. This has to do with resources. If resources were really equally available, nothing of this would happen. Those people will not take this dangerous journey. And you know, the mental trauma result of such a journey is lasting much longer than the journey itself. And if resources were really available and aid is accessible, many organizations, like the one I worked for, will not even be necessary. But sadly, up to date, our work is still very vital and more needed than ever. Let me elaborate on that. When you go home and watch the news channels, you kind of get faced with images like that, right? Displacements, sickness. However, those images are quite overwhelming. There are a lot, they're everywhere, right? So sometimes you get actually distant. You don't understand what's going on. And you forget that behind these numbers and figures are actually real people. Families with dreams, lives, and hopes. And not just statistics. My idea with that animation that I wanted to bring one of these images close to you so you can look at it. This place could be could be anywhere, right? This place could be actually in Gaza, in Ukraine, in Sudan. The location itself doesn't matter. What matters is what happened, is the people and what happened to them. So let me tell you a story about this image, this footage. A story that really I haven't shared with so many people at the same time, so I hope you are good in keeping secrets. If I tell you that this is actually the house where I grew up. Yes? The year was 1986. The day before was just an ordinary day. 1986. I was at the same age as my teenage son. So you can do your math a little bit. The day before I went to school, played volleyball, ate some dinner with my family, and we had some people staying over. The day after, everything changed. We got caught in crossfire when rebels attempted to take over a city. Our, our two-story house I just looked at got hit by a tank. The whole building collapsed on our heads. My mother threw herself on the floor to protect my 1-year-old brother, and we all ran into the kitchen, not realizing that the kitchen was actually the only room that was left intact. We stayed there all night. All night. That was the longest night of my life. And we didn't know what's going to happen next. And you know, let's say it like this. The good news, of course, that we survived, all of us. It was a miracle. And today, up to this date, I'm incredibly grateful to my amazing neighbors who managed to pull us out from the debris and gave us security and refuge. And by the way, this is how it works in this kind of crisis situations. The ones who get to you first, actually your closest neighbors, not the international community. So be good to them. But you know, years has passed, and memories and pictures and dates start to fade. But one crystal clear memory from that time still stuck in my head. All night long, we could hear the sirens of the ambulance. They would come close. Our hearts will pump up. We'll get on our feet. We say, now, help is coming. But they never stopped. They never stopped to look for survivors. They would drive away. Over and over again, all night long. We got to know a little bit, a few months after, why they couldn't stop. First of all, they said, we couldn't imagine that there's someone still alive under the debris. The second thing, that they thought that the situation was so dangerous, so they couldn't risk their own lives. When I heard this, I made a silent promise to myself that one day, if I ever have the chance, I will do something. I didn't know what. Probably as a teenager, I was thinking I would become the president of the world. But I'm happy this job is already taken by someone else, so I can do what I like to do. But I would do something, so this situation will not repeat itself. Because at that time, we felt completely abandoned. We felt that the whole world has abandoned us. So I wanted to do something, so no family, no child will feel again abandoned. That actually was the transformation moment that set the course of my life to the direction it took today. Not just by attending medical school, but by joining an organization like Doctors Without Borders. So another ambulance could reach its target. Another child, another family would get the help when they need it. Today, we are constantly exposed to war and conflicts on our news channels, social media, TVs. It's a constant stream, sometimes actually in real life. We're sitting home and watching war and conflict. I'm afraid that might have shaped our tolerance I believe we might have reached actually a state of saturation, or even worse, a dangerous state of normalization. And we think like, oh yeah, that's life, it's unfair, people die. But let me be your sounding mirror today, sounding actually mirror, and remind you that war is never normal. The loss of life, the suffering are all real. I believe that none of us went to school and learned how to start up wars, or how to intentionally actually ruin someone else's life. But yet, estimate indicates that last year we had a rise of 25% of political conflicts just in 1 year, and over 200,000 people got killed just in 1 year. And today we have 1 in 7 to 1 in 8 living actually in conflict areas. But that is not normal. That type of mindset can drive us away from critically questioning what's really happening. So remember, that's not normal. And you know the hardest part to me, that today even healthcare is under attack. Hospitals are bombed, ambulances are targeted, and healthcare personnel, staff, and patients are under constant threat. There are few estimates that says that actually there are over 400 people got killed. 400 health staff got killed last year on duty globally. Even if in MSF, we got our actually share of that. We lost doctors, nurses, drivers, lot of colleagues on duty. That's not acceptable. Healthcare should not be a target. That's against every kind of international regulations you know about, against Geneva Convention. But even war have rules. You shouldn't attack health services or health personnel. And we should always remember that we are not a target. I am not a target. And as health professionals, we should be all against that. Because if we can't guarantee the safety of those who work with, then we still won't be able to deliver the care we like to do. And from another perspective, as a public health perspective, war actually worsens every health situation you know about. It magnifies health problems. It could be like simple measures, like milk for babies, vaccines for kids, or sanitary pads for girls with period. You won't have access to it. What happens if you have diabetes and you don't get access to insulin? Or if you are in cancer therapy or HIV therapy and you don't have access to that? So one thing is like the consequences of bullets, bombs, and shelling, and the other aspect is the parallel negative aspect of lack of access to vital healthcare. I remember when we were in Liberia, and we were kind of preparing our staff to treat war wounded. We got overwhelmed by the number of pregnant women who were actually seeking to give birth, delivery care, because those aspects never stop, even during a conflict. The good news is that neither I nor people that I know are willing to take no for an answer. We came this far. We can't just give up now. One of the important crucial aspects I learned in this journey that our impact isn't just measured by delivering medicine or performing surgery. It's as well very important to advocate, to raise awareness. That's why I'm standing here in front of you today, to voice the unspoken. And you know, when you work in such a team, in this team, there are only 2 doctors, except me. I'm the third one. The rest of the team are actually people like you, logisticians, telecommunications, finance, administrators, drivers. Everyone is contributing. So don't ever underestimate those little small acts that could have a huge collective impact. And today, one of these team members are actually here. It's my wife, Anna. She's sitting somewhere there. You can you can actually fact check what I said with her later on. But we can't do this alone. We are dependent of your engagement. Otherwise, nothing of this would be possible. The other good news, that you don't have to take the same journey as I did. You don't have to stay on the front line. But I think you can do a little bit more than just clicking a like on the social media. A little more than that thumb up. You have the power to organize yourselves in schools, in work, places, in local societies, and question your politicians and demand answers. A few months ago, we collected 60,000 signatures in a petition that we sent to the government to take an action against targeting healthcare. You can become a hero today by giving someone else a voice, by assisting, saving one life at a time. The minimum act, I think, is actually to speak out and to refuse to remain silent. Because even if we don't really believe that words can save life, I strongly believe that silence can kill. Thank you for listening to me.